Bonjour, good morning, buenos dias, distinguidos invitados. A special welcome to the colleagues of the Embassy of Mexico in Canada and from the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Estoy encantada de dar ustedes la bienvenida a este evento científico. Como mi español no es muy bueno, con el permiso de ustedes, continuaré en inglés. Muchas gracias. My name is Lise Langlois. I am the director of the International Observatory of the Societal Impact of AI and Digital Technology. Christian, Wanda, Guillaume, and myself have had the pleasure to prepare this seminar. The aim of this seminar is to get acquainted with the research work of the Mexican researchers and our research team at the OBVIA. I hope you will enjoy this gathering and start new collaboration. And now may I introduce Christian of the Department of Communication, Science and Design in Guatemala. Christian.
Thank you very much, Lise. I'm very pleased to be here today with all of you. On behalf of the Mexican artificial intelligence community, I appreciate the original initiative of OBVIA to hold this seminar on the responsible use of artificial intelligence between researchers of Quebec and Mexico. It is not the first meeting between Mexico and Quebec on artificial intelligence issues, but it is, as far as I know, the first meeting between exclusively between researchers from both countries. This meeting is clearly marked by diversity and inclusion. Diversity, not only of gender, which is evident, but also of generations, as well as the inclusion of different approaches and points of view of the topics that will be discussed in this dialogue with experts from the technical field of AI and from areas of social and environmental sciences. Our seminar is organized around 3 sessions. The first session will be on AI and health. The facilitator will be Catherine Regis. The second one will be on AI, culture, and environment. The facilitator will be Colette Prin. And tomorrow, the third session will be on AI, gender, and social justice. The facilitator will be Wanda Munoz. I want to thank my partner in this journey, Wanda Munoz. On the Mexican side, she has been a key player in the organization of this seminar. Without her vision and enthusiasm, it would have been impossible to gather such an excellent group of Mexican participants and attendees. Wanda and I have been working together as members of the Mexican representation of the GPA. We participate in the subgroup Responsible AI, and she will be the facilitator of tomorrow's session. Although in Mexico, the academic field of artificial intelligence is organized around various scientific associations, we have not managed to establish a multidisciplinary network such as OBVIA. I hope that this contact between our two communities will allow us to not only to advance in a better knowledge of both sides and eventually in research collaboration between our colleagues. But also, I hope that it will allow us to infuse in Mexico new encouragement to create multidisciplinary networks among all those interested in promoting a new type of research in artificial intelligence focused on the well-being of humans and the well-being of our planet. Well, I think it's time to start our first session of artificial intelligence. I'm very pleased to Sorry. I'm very pleased to introduce the facilitator of this session, Catherine Régis. She's full professor of the Faculty of Law at the University de Montréal. She's holder of the Canada Research Chair on Collaborative Culture and Health Law and Policy, co-director of the Hub Health Policy Organization and Law, and member of the OBVIA. Well, Catherine, I'm very pleased to meet you in this moment, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, first of all, for the invitation. I'm very excited to be here today and spend the next hours with you. To start with, we have kind of two different events that will go simultaneously. So we're gonna start with the presentation of different researchers, their work. And after that, we're gonna engage in a roundtable with different people. We were trying to link the two events to connect, to make some conversation between the two along the way. So for the panel, I'm gonna briefly introduce the different speakers. You have the bios, I think, in a document that OBVIA circulated. So if you want to have more information on their amazing background, please do so. But I'll stay brief because we don't have that much time. So we're gonna have about an hour for this first panel. If you have any comments, I really strongly encourage you to put them in the chat. So we're gonna ask the question probably at the end of the two events, but still if there's something a pressing issue or some clarification you wanna know or ask the participants, please feel free to do so and I'll manage that. So right away, let's start. So we have 4 speakers, as I mentioned. They're gonna have more or less 15 minutes. I really ask you please to stay on time. And I'll just let you know 2 minutes before your time is up that you are at that stage of your presentation. So first of all, and it's not, we haven't discussed the orders. So I don't know if you have strong feeling about this, but otherwise I'm just gonna proceed with what was mentioned in the email for the order. So to start with, we have Faiz Ahmad Khan and his team. I know there, Pierre-Marie David is also in the talk, and maybe a postdoc, if I understood well, Julian Ono. So Faiz Ahmad Khan is associate professor at the Department of Medicine at McGill University. Pierre-Marie David is assistant professor at the Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Montreal. And they're gonna talk about an interdisciplinary case study to critically evaluate the development and implementation of an artificial intelligence-based tool for diagnosis of tuberculosis, which is the world leading infectious killer. So that's gonna be the first presentation. And then I'm gonna present each person before they speak. So Faiz, I don't know if you're online. I don't see all the people, but the floor is yours. You have about 15 minutes. Thank you.
Yes.
Great. Thanks very much. So yeah, Pierre, thank you very much for the introduction and for having us to talk today. So I'll start very quickly because yeah, there's 3 of us to squeeze into 15 minutes, and I promise you it'll be done. Pierre-Marie, I guess you have our title slide on. Yeah, AI solutions to global health challenges, an interdisciplinary case study. So we could show the second slide. So today we'll be talking about a infectious disease. Is the second slide on, Pierre-Marie?
Yes, it's
okay,
on.
I see it. Yeah, thanks. There's a bit of a lag in Nunavik. So it's a deadly airborne infectious disease. It's transmitted from person to person through the air. Affected 10 million people in a year and killed 1.4 million of them. And the World Health Organization declared it a global health emergency. If you go to the next slide.
That's it.
So of course, I'm not talking about what you may think I'm talking about, which is SARS-CoV-2 or COVID, but I'm instead talking about this bacteria, which is located on the right hand of your screen, which is in fact tuberculosis, a much more ancient disease. If you could go to the next slide, please. So hopefully you're seeing on your screen a graph that shows there's been over 1 million deaths from tuberculosis every year, going back over 20 years. And until 2020, till the emergence of COVID, TB was the world's leading cause of death from an infectious disease. So this graph shows that in the year 2000, there was about 2.5 million people who died from TB, and in 2019, it was 1.4 million. And of course, many of you may know TB is predominantly a disease of low and middle income countries, as well as some emerging economies of China, South Africa, India, and Nigeria. If you could go to the next slide, please. So in the recent past few years, there's been a new goal introduced by global health agencies and the World Health Organization, which is to end TB around the world. And one of the big challenges to this is that every year there are, of the 10 million people who develop TB, almost 4 million are never diagnosed with tuberculosis. We call these the millions missed each year. And in order to find these, this is renewed interest in a century-old technology, chest X-ray. If you could go to slide number 6. So chest X-rays have been used for TB screening and diagnosis in Europe and North America, as I said, for over a century now, and we still use them today. They're an essential part of helping to know who does or does not have tuberculosis. However, elsewhere in the world, in the countries where TB is mostly causing deaths and is mostly not diagnosed, chest X-ray has never been widely implemented for the classic sort of global health reasons that it's too expensive, but also because there aren't radiologists to correctly interpret the chest X-ray image. On the left there, we see a truck that was used to screen in Canada with X-rays. These mobile trucks would go around here to Vancouver, and whole neighborhoods would undergo chest X-ray screening. This was done in Europe and North America throughout the 20th century until the early 70s. So the next slide, please. This brings us to computer-aided detection. So here we have an image of a woman sitting in a truck. She's a radiology technician sitting in a truck in Pakistan, a low-income country. And on her computer screen, you see a digital chest X-ray image. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you see a heat map of that image. And this shows how artificial intelligence and digital imaging are starting to transform, or hoping to transform tuberculosis care around the world. It is hoped that digital chest X-rays will drop the price of doing a chest X-ray, and that the availability of this artificial intelligence software to look at the X-ray, to analyze the X-ray, instead of a human radiologist, will obviate, no pun intended, obviate the need to have a specialist human to read the X-rays. Slide number 8. So how well does this technology work? So our team has led systematic reviews of the literature, and we found that there was high potential for bias in the evidence base. In one of those parts is because there was a lot of commercial and developer interest in all the studies that were done. We received funding from the CIHR, the Canadian National Health Funding Agency, and in 2020 our study was published. We did a study where we enrolled 2,200 people presenting with symptoms of TB to a clinic in Pakistan. All of them had a chest X-ray, which was analyzed by this computer technology, by this AI technology, and was compared to the gold standard for diagnosing TB, which is collecting spits from people and testing it to see if the TB organism is there. And we found that actually these CAD technology met the World Health Organization recommendations for accuracy, but it was affected by patient characteristics. It did not perform as accurately in all patients. This made us wonder what could happen in different populations. So if you go to the next slide, number 9. So to understand this, we collaborated with colleagues and using very gratefully funding from OBVIA, we collaborated with colleagues in Pakistan, South Africa, Tanzania, and Zambia, who sent us 3,700 x-rays of people with TB symptoms, 17% of whom actually had the disease. And we tested 3 deep learning-based CAD technologies. Go to the next slide. And so this was called an individual patient data meta-analysis, and it's felt to be the highest level of evidence used for medical decision-making. And in this individual patient data meta-analysis, we concluded that actually these technologies are capable of detecting the majority, a very high proportion of the people with TB, but the accuracy varies between the populations. It's affected by HIV status, and this means that rather than something that you can simply buy and install and use straight out of the box, this technology needs local calibration and local validation, which is a major implementation challenge, particularly in the places where it's most needed, in very poor settings where there's not a lot of funding and resources to undertake such evaluations. Nevertheless, we presented our OBVIA-funded work in 2021 to the World Health Organization, and for the first time, this technology was approved for use internationally by the WHO for screening and detection of TB. I'll pass it on to Pierre-Marie or Julien.
Okay.
Julien.
Ouais, je vais enchaîner. Okay, thank you everyone for being here. Thanks to the OBVIA for organizing this online conference. My name is Julian Ono. I am a postdoctoral researcher in sociology at the University of Montreal. And first of all, I want to elaborate on the context of our research. It starts with the simple finding that there is a never-increasing part of AI tools like machine learning, deep learning, in health, but there is still few field works in social sciences about this particular object. In the broad field of health, we are particularly interested with the use of computer-assisted diagnosis tools, like FAS presented, in radiology to diagnose tuberculosis. These tools extend usually in the form of pilots or experimental projects in multiple local contexts, that FAS presented and that we will discuss further in this presentation. We want also to analyze the place of AIs in the context of global health. Indeed, the potential of such an automatic tool is significant for a disease like tuberculosis, which is a global health priority. And despite great promises, the use of this technology remains poorly or not at all supervised, and the concrete effects on the care of identified patients and on the healthcare system in general are poorly documented. This dissemination is not without raising a number of questions in regards to the efficiency, to the accuracy, to the ethics of the implemented algorithm, and to the ownership of the data collected. We can add that this specific problem crosses the whole heterogeneous domain of AI today. Within this research, we want to look at the way algorithms are thought and designed, and therefore we'll focus on 3 companies which design algorithm tools for diagnosis tuberculosis. We'll examine the company Delft Imaging, as you can see on this slide, a Dutch company, and its tool CAD4TB. We can read on the website that CAD4TB was designed to help non-expert readers to detect tuberculosis more accurately and cost-effectively. The speed of digital X-ray combined with deep learning and remote expertise make CAD4TB a valuable asset in the fight against TB. We will also examine Lunit, a Korean company, and we can read on their website that AI will be the new standard of care by Lunit. With AI, we aim to make data-driven medicine the new standard of care. We are especially focused on conquering cancer, one of the leading causes of death worldwide. And we will also examine Cure AI, an Indian company, and its tool QXR, which enable an automated chest X-ray interpretation. So this research has multiple objectives. First, to evaluate efficiency and accuracy of the diagnosis tools through a quantitative study that my colleague Faz has detailed before. Then it seeks to understand a number of epistemological stakes, such as how the CAD AI are trained and from which data, what flexibilities CAD and AI devices need to implement to be used in different contexts. And it's also looking to understand a matter of socio-political and public health issues. The socio-anthropological approach to global health and science and technology that we mobilize aims to question the possible inequalities in health that are at stake in the use of CAD AI, particularly in the access of patients, but also of countries and their hospital structure. We can here ask a series of questions. What emerging forms of government and care CAD AI involve? How does the use of CAD AI fit into issues of social inequalities in health? And does this technology open the door to more equitable care? We can also add that we seek to question the possible assumption and bias that may lie at the heart of algorithm diagnostic. And now I will let Pierre-Marie David speak about the methodology.
Thank you, Julian. I think I have 3 minutes left, but it will be very short. So the methodology for the qualitative part is a multi-site qualitative and ethnographic section. Although it's very difficult, we built the project thinking that we could go on the field, but with COVID, it seems much more complicated, but we'll see how we can do it. But still, we want to contrast the experience of CAD pilot experimenting in Pakistan, Ghana, Indonesia, and Quebec in Nunavik. Faz is now in Nunavik, and it's a very important issue also to manage tuberculosis and to see if this tool can be helpful. As you know, there are a major problem with health professionals in Quebec and more specifically in distant places. So that's really an issue. So we will conduct semi-structured interviews with developers and designers of CAD in every software that has been tested by Faz and his team, to see how they are accurate and to see also how they represent the gathering of the data and the use of the algorithm. We will also conduct interviews with users and regulators. As Faz said, we were I was also witness for the elaboration of the WHO guidelines last summer. So there are a number of issues about regulation that will be addressed, and of course all the documentary analysis. We'll try to map the actors network that are involved, but also try to let emerge the themes in the interviewees' discourse, and try to address the power issues. As Faz mentioned, there are really huge commercial interest behind this promise to eradicate tuberculosis, and they need to be addressed, especially in the context of global health. So there are different levels of analysis that we will address. So in terms of access to care, because it's for screening, but what happens next is an important question. Then in the care that is delivered, in terms of health policies, and in terms of equity regarding the development of the algorithm. I can go further if you like, but I think the time is now running. So the benefits that should come with the study, a socio-anthropological perspective on local issues of CAD. There are not many. There start to be in Europe, but not in the field of global health. We will try to highlight the ongoing reconfiguration between technologies, knowledge, and care. It's not just about using a new tool in the same world. This tool transforms the world of care. We'll try to address this question. And finally, the heterogeneity of the fields we want to address can be a limitation, but we hope it will be a potential for generalization of the results. So thank you very much for your attentions, and we are very pleased to welcome Julian Ono, who is the postdoc on this project. With all the pandemic and the difficulty to have people recruited around the world, we were very happy to see him come through and make it across the borders and to work with us. So these are thoughts in progress, and we would be very happy to share, if you can share your suggestions on this project. Thank you very much, people in Quebec and in Mexico, for this interesting panel.
Well, thank you very much, Faiz, Julien, and Pierre-Marie, for this super clear, very efficient, and clearly your work is on a very important topic, and it's what a good example of a project that connects the STEMs with social science. So I think it's really fabulous. So thank you very much. I just remind you all that if you have any questions or comment, you can put them in the chat, and we're going to have a period for that later on. So thank you again. Now we're moving on to Eduardo. I don't speak Spanish apart from una cerveza, por favor, and so that's pretty much what I can do today, but I'm very sorry about that. So Eduardo Morales is a full professor, Department of Computer Science at the Instituto Nacional de Astrofísica, Óptica y Electrónica. Ooh, very sorry about that. So he's going to speak about an AI-based diagnosis system for COVID-19 and other lung diseases using X-rays, CT scans, and clinical data. Thank you, Eduardo. The floor is yours for 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you, the organizers, for inviting me to give this talk. This is about a joint project between INAOE, that's easier than Instituto Nacional de Astrofísica, and CIMAT, which is another research center in Mexico. And I'm going to talk about classifying the lung pathologies using X-ray images. So, okay. So the initial motivation was basically the pandemic, which, as you all know, has been spread worldwide with a lot number of cases and deaths, and there has been also these recurrent waves of infection. The figure in the lower, sorry about that, is in the lower part is the waves in Mexico, and there has also been unequal vaccination in the world. So basically, Mexico was hit particularly hard with this disease because of its high rates of hypertension, obesity, diabetes, and there's also deficient infrastructure in Mexico. It's basically impossible to impose confinement because half of the population lives in an informal economy. There's also some limited resources, and there's not enough specialists for this disease. So for any kind of illness, you need to have a good diagnosis system, and the predominant source for diagnosis has been based on PCR. However, PCR tests are expensive. They have delayed results. Now it's much quicker, but at the beginning, they were taking several days, even a week, to get a result and require special equipment. Now, something that very soon the experts on this field realized is that this virus SARS-CoV-2 causes pneumonia, which could be detected by imaging. So this prompted a large number of researchers to propose alternative diagnosis system based on X-rays and CT scans. And we actually we were doing exactly the same thing at the beginning of last year. Now, after some point, we realized that most of these systems were initially created either with very small data sets or with non-normalized data from a wide variety of sources, and they mainly focus on COVID and not COVID results. And very few are really ready for clinical use. And we did the same. I mean, we produced a system for COVID and not COVID, but after a while, we realized that a medical image analysis would be much more helpful if it could distinguish between different lung diseases. Of course, we were aiming for having fast results, to have it widely applicable so that almost any doctor or clinic could apply this technology. It should be low cost and hopefully should give competitive results with other existing technologies, or even with some doctors in case there were no experts available. So what we did is we get this data. This is called the chest X-ray 14, which is a database of 14 chest pathologies, which we enrich it with other cases, healthy cases, other cases of pneumonia, and COVID-19 patients. So we for diagnosis in this kind of a scenario is basically an image classification problem, which recently with the arrival of these deep learning techniques, a common way of attacking this image classification problems is to use a pre-trained deep learning model. Normally it's trained with ImageNet, which is a very large data set of images. And this pre-trained model is used as a backbone to create a new classification model. In this case, for diagnosis X-rays images. In our case, we experiment with different networks, and at the end we use ResNet 50, which is illustrated. The architecture is illustrated in the lower figure. Now we follow a three-step training. We initially train what is called the dense network for several epochs, which is basically the last part of this deep network, which is fully connected with training for some time. Then we fine-tune the last convolutional layers for another epoch. That means we kept frozen all the network except the last stages, and also and we also keep training the very last layers, and at the very end we unfroze all the weights and train for a little bit longer. We use several things like segmentation, resizing. We use weights to consider violent classes, equalize images, and so on. And we also use data augmentations. I mean, all these techniques are like common techniques in this type of when using this type of networks. These are the results. We compare our model with some of the state-of-the-art systems. Each column is one of the different ones. The current base one is called ChessXNet from Stanford. And the next one is the results of our proposal. And there's also information from radiologists that were used to, which basically diagnose also the images in the test set. So as we can see, our system is very competitive with the current state of the art. We're almost the same as the base one, but we have also included an additional disease without sacrificing the performance of the rest of the network. And also our proposal is much more quicker to train that, for instance, ChestXNet, which suggests that we can use it in an incremental approach, so we can add some other diseases. And we're starting to work on tuberculosis, actually. I will show you some very, very initial results. So we also provide heat maps to basically to show the zones that contributed the most for the diagnosis, and that this can also help clinicians to make their own diagnosis. So now we're starting to look at tuberculosis. We obtained some data from different sources, and we just fed directly the images of tuberculosis directly to the system to see what will be the prediction of the system. So when we put these cases into the system, most of them were predicted as pneumonia, which is a reasonable or expected result. Very few are confused with COVID, which is also a good result, because we don't want the system to be confused between these two diseases. And from the rest of the other diseases, the other 14 diseases, the system didn't predict any of the other diseases. So, I mean, with this initial system, with these initial results, we decided to say, okay, let's create an additional branch to the already trained system and make a simple training just of the densely connected network just at the end. And we have these initial results. I mean, they're not too bad. Basically, what we have to do is to retrain all the system with this information of tuberculosis to make it to enlarge this table with this additional disease. So we're working at the moment on that process, but the very initial results look encouraging, at least to us. Of course, we in addition to X-ray, we were in parallel creating diagnosis for using CT scans with the typical thing of normal pneumonia and COVID, which is what most of the other systems have been done, both in CT scans and X-rays. We also have this processing of alignment and segmentation and so on, and here we also have quite good results. This is a confusion matrix where the diagonals are, I mean, the rows are the real cases, the columns are the predicted cases from the system. And if we have high numbers in the diagonals, that means that we are having good results, at least on this, for this, distinguishing between COVID pneumonia and normal. And for that, we also produce heat maps. And these are just some results. And in addition with this, we also built a Bayesian classifier using information from patients, information from gender, age, things like that, but also with the common systems of COVID, like headaches or sore throat, runny nose, loss of smell, and so on. And we tried different Bayesian classifiers, And our results were not too bad. It's about 80% in terms of accuracy, precision, recall, one measure. So with one of the systems, which is it's a regional performance. Aiming to have this system available in general, we create a web page where the system can be accessible through internet. A doctor has to register to the system. We allow him to use the system. They can register clinical data from the patients and different patient information. The doctor can upload images in different formats, and the information is stored. So the doctor can look later at the data and can also perform follow-up to see the progress of the disease. Even images can be sent via email, and the diagnosis will be sent back. So this is, we believe that this is a good technique, so that could be available to a large number of doctors. So as part of our current and future work, we would like to, we're in the process of integrating all these systems to produce more accurate diagnosis. So if there's information only of some symptoms of the patient, we can produce some diagnosis. If there's information of X-rays, we can also produce some diagnosis. If there's information of CT scans as well. But if we have more than one source of information, then we can combine it to try to produce better diagnosis. And we're in the process of including our pathologies and make it accessible to public hospitals. Now, this certainly was not an isolated work. There were several people working in the development of the system, and we collaborate with different doctors from IMSS, which is the largest health public institution in Mexico, and with INER, which is the National Institute of Respiratory Diseases, which are the expert in this type of domain. And we have some support from CONACYT and from Consorcio de Inteligencia Artificial in Mexico, and that's it. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take questions later.
Muchas gracias, Eduardo. Again, a very clear presentation. Even for a legal scholar like me, I could understand the numbers, so it's a big success, I guess. And very interesting. We can see that you are, like the first presentation, really concerned about access and making all this work to eventually increase access. And then we're going to discuss, that was the last point, I think, whether hospitals can really uptake and introduce these innovations into their system. That's a big challenge, like development, but then implementation in practice, there's a big gap. So I guess we can discuss that later on and learn from each other on that side. So thank you again very much, Eduardo. So now we have, I don't know how to pronounce it. Please correct me. Ulises, is that?
Yes, Ulises is okay.
Oh, okay, thank you. I wasn't too bad. So he's the AI director of Gobierno de Jalisco. He's gonna speak about AI-based referral system for patients with diabetic retinopathy in Jalisco. So thank you for your presentation. You have 15 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Especially to Wanda and Christian, and of course all the organizer. So we want to talk about the models that we implement in the case of diabetic retinopathy, and this is the outline or the agenda of this talk. We want to start with a short introduction about what is Jalisco. Jalisco is a state from Mexico, is a region of Mexico, and we have a very exciting artificial intelligence ecosystem, and we are part of the OBVIA. I don't know what is that. We are partner of OBVIA, yes. So we have a big ecosystem here in Jalisco, and we, as Christian says, we have a lot of communication with the Quebec region, and because we are part of this, we collaborate with some events, and actually the last year we was in this summer school, and this is another kind of event we are currently collaborate with the Quebec region, in particular with Viviana Pulido from, I think is from here, and Mar Actuan. Okay, we are in the Coordinación General de Innovación, and we work with inside of the government in order to implement new technologies inside of the government, yes. And this is our core team. We are here, and we and in this work we work together with Abraham Sanchez, especially, and these other team members also help in this work. Yes, so this project related with diabetic retinopathy is a FAIRLAC project. FAIRLAC is a platform from the IDB lab and these other partners to try to harness the power of artificial intelligence for social impact in Latin America and Caribbean area. Yes, so I believe we was the first region of all Latin America, with this project, and we had 2 pilots in so far. One is early detection of diabetic retinopathy, and the other one is school dropout detection. So the diabetic retinopathy is a problem related with the diabetes mellitus, and in Mexico is a big issue, it's a big problem, because perhaps we are we have the highest rate of diabetes mellitus in the world, and we have only a few doctors who work in this area in Jalisco. So if we want to make a national screening program, or in this case only from Jalisco, we could have around 500,000 retina images per year. But with this number of specialists, it's almost impossible to have this kind of, or to review these exams. So these specialists see the image or working with the patient. So we try to implement a model in order to screen the images, and left the retina specialists in order to train and work with the patients. So we want to highlight these principles, ethical principles in this work, and you can see along the slides some of these ethical principles that we use in the creation of the models. Yes, so first, the data. We use a similar technique that they mentioned before. It's a transfer learning. We use public data sets, IPAX, we say here Kaggle, but it's an IPAX data set, Hydrate and Mesidor, which is from France. And we have another local data sets only for testing, yes, here. And the images look like this. Is in a few years ago, some people says this kind of image classification is called fine-grained deep learning because it's too similar, the images. Now it's just deep learning. So we use this kind of data set to train validation. That's the common thing. So the classic diabetic retinopathy workflow in Mexico is like this. So we have an image, and according to the result of the image, the patient go to the first level of health for another screening, or in the second level for a kind of treatment, or if it's very bad, the result, they go to the third level of health. So we try to get some models at the end to have at least this kind of performance with 80% of sensitivity and 95% of specificity. And we translate this kind of workflow for this new data workflow using artificial intelligence. And this is the models that we create in order to supply this kind of things. So we want to highlight we don't do only a classification model. We make a pre-processing, a kind of quality screening. Yeah, we show you why we that. Okay, so the first model, we call that M0 or cropping model. And the main issue with this model is make a kind of pre-processing of the image, remove this background, and sometimes fill this because we use some models, well, mostly of the convolutional neural network model needs to have the same size images. So we don't have this in the training data. So we need to transform these kind of images. To do that, we use a UNet in order to get these kind of results, and then cropping and sometimes fill the background. This operation help us to improve the performance in sometimes 2 or 3%. So we use this pre-processing technique, and also help us to detect some very bad quality images. For instance, if we don't, if the unit can crop the image, we don't use that image. So the second model is very important. We show you, we highlight this in later, because we make a hybrid model with, after the cropping, we classify, we have a mobile net, and then a detection of the macula and the optic nerve here. And we combine this anatomical information with this detection technique with the classification convolutional neural network in order to detect the quality of the image to classify. For instance, we have this image, which is good quality, and according to the GradCam, the neural network see these regions, which is important. And in this case, where we have some saturation here, the network see here. So we create a new CNN in this case with more efficient than this. And we use this because it's very important for the next models. In order to make the classification of these M1, M2, M3, we make a kind of benchmarking of these neural networks. And at the end, we use another one, which is Inception B4, in order to classify the images in this stage and this stage and this stage. So in this case, we try to make a course classification with the levels from 0 to 2, and 3 and 4. So this is the classification of D1, and D2 is a kind of fine-grained classification, and D3 also a fine-grained classification. And we get these results, which is good because we want, is closer to the object that we want. But then we tried these models with the local data, and we get very low performance with that. We assume that we believe that that was because of the quality of the image, and we try to enhance the quality of the images using classical image processing techniques like Flagey, or improving the contrast, reducing the noise, and sometimes, but the results don't look good in this case. So this is a new problem? No, we can see this problem also in this a very good paper from Google, which developed a very good models of diabetic retinopathy classification. They try to implement this model in Thailand, but they get this kind of images with low quality. And then the performance of this model decreased significantly. Yes. So we try to make another solution for that. So we use this model, only the quality screening model, in order to use only the high quality images, and we get this result. So this is our previous result using almost everything. And this is our results, only selected the high quality images according to our previous neural network. And the results are very good because the loss is reducing significantly. So the confidence of the network increase. And you can see that now we can achieve the performance that we want to have the network. The increase is, the performance increased a lot. I'm sorry, this is more than 80% and closer to this. So we tackle this kind of problem with this. So this problem, it can be seen in different ways. Some people call data drift, out of distribution data, cognitive bias in some cases. Some solution for that is robust learning. In our case, we try to don't show this kind of images because the network can manage these kind of images. This could be an error, yes. So we want to highlight some possible bias in these kind of models. Some people try to get using these kind of images from the retina and predict the sex, and then predict the sex and the age, and then predict the sex, age, smoking, diabetes, hypertension. And this one is about 17 or 18 clinical and other features of the patient. So how is possible to know if our model could be have some bias of the gender? So we don't have this information in this public data. We don't know if this image come from a male or female. So we need to get more data with these kind of labels, and then try with the models with this kind of data, and evaluate how much could be the bias because of, for instance, the sex or the age or the other things. So we published this work mostly in this journal, but we have a few years working in that. This is a lot of things, some technical and some other related with ethics. And of course, we don't work alone. We work in the FAIRLAC initiative, and this all these institutions work with us because we try to implement this in the first level of health in Jalisco, in 3 hospitals actually. So we have a lot of support with these institutions. So kind of conclusion, we develop some convolutional neural network models, and we try to use these ethical principles to make a more responsible artificial intelligence. And we want to highlight the problems with the image quality data, and the solution that we provide. The second one, I mean, use a network in order to screening the images. Sounds good for us. And I think that's all. This work is, as we say, with Abraham Sanchez, which is my partner in Jalisco, and he made almost all the experiments. So thank you, everyone.
Muchas gracias, Ulises, for this very, talking about this very important project and multi-stakeholders. That's a good example of such kind of project. I was curious at the end, you mentioned that you referred to some ethical principles in your work. So I was wondering which principle did you choose or where they came from, because we have so many tools right now in the AI world about ethics. I was wondering what was your reference, but perhaps we can discuss that later as well. Thank you again. That was very interesting. So last but not least, now we are moving to Montreal team. Well, yeah, Montreal, not from University of Montreal, but for the city. So we have Marie-Pascale Paumé, a fantastic colleague of mine and a good friend as well. She's a full professor at the Department of Management, Evaluation and Health Policy, University of Montreal. We also have, I don't know if he's there yet though, but Esli Umaniu. He's an assistant professor from McGill. And we have the famous Sylvain Bédard. We were on a call yesterday together, so it's fun to see him again, who is a patient coordinator. And they're going to speak about a project called Digitix, which brings the citizen perspective for socially acceptable and sustainable use of contact notification technologies in the context of a pandemic. So surely a very important, timely, and controversial topic. So, and I'm part of this project, so I'm excited to hear more about it. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Marie-Pascale.
Thank you very much indeed for the invitation. And I would like to thank especially Lise Langlois, Guillaume Macot, and yourself, Catherine. And thank you also for OBVIA for to have financed this project also. I am not able to share my screen. Is it normal? Yes, it's okay. So today we will do the presentation in 2 voices and not 3, because Esli wasn't able to attend the meeting today, but we hope that we will be able to do that, Sylvain and I. So this project is really related to citizen and patient perspective for socially acceptance use of digital contact tracing and exposure notification apps. Our research team was very interesting, and we had the person coming from different fields. For example, engineering, public health, law, of course, social science, methodology and ethics. And we had also some collaborators coming from different places and different places where we do patient and citizen engagement in Quebec. So the research context, as you know, digital contact tracing and exposure notification apps are quickly emerge as a potential solution to support manual tracing during the COVID-19 pandemic. But there are strong tensions between the protection of individual rights and collective benefits. So citizens and patients are rarely consulted and included in the process of developing techno-scientific tools. So we thought that through these DGC projects, it will be a good opportunity to put forward their perspectives for a socially acceptable and sustainable use of these technologies in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our objectives were to enriching the public debate through collaborative research, also to study citizens and patients' perspectives on digital contact tracing and exposure notification apps, and finally to facilitate collaborations that promote responsible and ethical digital health innovation. More specifically, we wanted to study the social acceptability of digital contact tracing and exposure notification apps in a pandemic context. And through that, we were able to create an advisory committee of citizens, patients, partners, and co-researchers for the co-creation of a provincial survey. And we also want to determine public perspectives regarding these tools. So by review of the literature, conducted to a better idea on the design and implementation of exposure notifications, focusing on aspects related to participatory and responsible in e-health. And we want to publish this scoping review in the GMR a few months ago. And here I will summarize what we've done so far. So we use 3 different theoretical frameworks to analyze the literature. The first one was really related to improve the uptake and impact of e-health technologies that has been published by von Germet-Pichnen and is around 6 principles, for example, the citizens' engagement. We also use the Montreal model, which is related to how and at which level we can include patient and citizen engagement in different projects. And finally, we use the responsible innovation in health assessment tool to look at how this kind of tool can be sustainable and be following equity rules. So the results show that few articles describe the impact of digital contact tracing and exposure notification apps on the environmental, organizational, and economic domains, which are essential to assess responsible innovation in health according to the Responsible Innovation in Health Assessment tool. Also, few articles mention the need for continuous evaluation of the application or have provided reflections on their overall impact on healthcare or the organization or on their implementation following the holistic framework to improve the uptake and impact of e-technologies. Of the studies describing some forms of public participation, almost all were based on consultation rather than collaboration or partnership following the Montreal model. So through this scoping review, we were able to make some recommendations. The first one was really to have a better way to involve citizen and patient in the development of this kind of technology, also to inform users of measures taken to protect their privacy, to look at the changed terminology from tracking apps to exposure notification apps, to perform continual evaluation of this kind of applications by users themselves, and to investigate factors that improve the relationship between app adoption and public health effectiveness. The second part of the project was related to the development of a questionnaire and to do a survey among the Quebec population. Mm-hmm. So we've done first of all, the definition of the different objectives that we were reaching. Then we selected the main themes, we've done the co-creation, and finally, we've done the survey.
Mm-hmm.
We had a very great advisory committee, so maybe you can follow up, Silva?
Yeah, and I think that one of the main, not the main, but one of the great goal of that research, it was also to get the pulse of the community and the patient and the citizen. So we created a PAC, an advisory committee on based on a public offer that we did first, and then we narrowed down to, I think was 12 patients plus all the scientific guys that were there with us. So, and it was basically creating together the questionnaire, choosing the themes, choosing everything. And this is how we manage. The first meeting was really fun. We came up with 81 questions after the two first consultations, and we had to narrow down to 36, depending on depending on the pertinence of the questionnaires, and also how much time we repeated the same question. So making sure that it was also validated by all team, like multiple times. It wasn't just a one-shot deal. So making sure that the biostatistician understand that it was re-validating a couple of times. And most of the question went on smart accessibility, on technology, literacy, experience on the pandemic application, the intention, the fears, the motivation on of using the application, and the condition of accepting. So what is the no and no-go thing that the public is ready and having issues with that in for future application or future use. On peut the next one. Et puis, so we came up with 36 questions that was used by the sum polling firm that we surveyed with 1,196 respondents from all ages, teenagers to adults. And this is how we've came up with results that Marie-Pascale will present you a couple of short preliminary results.
Okay, so a higher proportion of adults downloaded the app compared to the adolescents. And also among those who download the application, a higher proportion of adolescents uninstalled it. So you can see that here, 45% of adults were able to download the application compared to 26% of adolescents. And here you can see that they decided to deactivate it. 25% of adolescents decided to deactivate it. Adults agree more than adolescents that this type of ad should be mandatory in a health emergency similar to COVID-19. However, for a health emergency more dangerous and deadly than COVID-19, adolescents agree at a higher level than adults. So that was also interesting to mention that. And the main concern in using this type of apps are very similar between adults and adolescents. For the adults, it was more related to to improve the design, so such as integrating statistics in the app, incorporating information on how to obtain and to enter the on-time key in the app, or having the positive test automatically recorded in the app, or integrating a vaccinal passport. For the adolescents, the teenagers, it was more related to technical features issues. And for example, they were not interested about geolocalization. They wanted also that this kind of application be made accessible to anterior version of smartphone and these kind of things. We've done also an evaluation of the participant experience. We've done a survey after the 2 co-creation meetings and individual interviews at the end of the project. And this research will be published soon in a Quebec journal. What we found is that the motivation to participate were related to the pandemic that has affected the patients. So they wanted to have their say in the technology that would be used by patients. They were also interested in getting involved in a research project that have an impact. They wanted to gain perspectives by talking to other people, and they wanted to make sure that the interests of end users are met. They were curious about what it means to co-construct a survey questionnaire. They enjoyed a lot the subject, the mini surveys to make the meeting more, but they really liked the way that we conducted the meetings. It was very interactive. The brainstorming groups also was very efficient to develop the questions, and they had the chance to express themselves very easily. They really appreciate the collective intelligence and the inclusion also in the process from the beginning. And so they had the impression to have the opportunity to make a real impact. So what could be improved? What was expected of participants could have been clearer expressed. Make sure that everyone have the same amount of time allowed, since some people tend to talk more than others. Having more time for both the brainstorming session and the discussion afterward, and have a more diverse committee to make sure to hear the perspectives of all concerned groups. So our next steps, first of all, we will communicate the results of the DGC project in the manuscript. So we have already one that has been submitted and another one is on its way. And we are working also through a citizen network to help citizens to be our voice in the Quebec community and elsewhere also. We want to report on the adaptations of the co-design process during a pandemic and the citizens and patients' experience, and an innovative process to validate a questionnaire. We really try to be very close to the patient and citizen perspective regarding this validate process. And it's not exactly the golden rules, so we want also to share that with the community. And finally, we want to discuss and share the study results with the stakeholders, including focus groups with members of vulnerable populations. So we will do those focus groups the next couple of weeks. So we would be very pleased to take your questions, and maybe Sylvain, you want to add something?
Yeah, if I can. From bottom up, I think it's also, and I look at the previous presentation, and it seems, and that was one of the discussion we had with Catherine yesterday. It seems that IA is an unknown world for most or all of citizens and patients. So it's interesting how we manage in there to not talk about really IA, but approach and touch to the thoughts of the public, considering the about the IA and everything, that the high technology that is not well known for patients and public. So I think it's really interesting, and I want to also, there's a lot of knowledge transfer going through. We want to publish on manuscript, and in the last experience that I have in research is also when you have citizens and patients in a research project, they could be a great source of knowledge transfer and dissemination in different ways of just regular publication, but also in a more broad Facebook thing or things like that. And this should be addressed to, and this should be considered when you have patient and public in your project. But c'est bon. Merci.
Oui. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Marie-Pascale and Sylvain. It brings back the very concrete and urgent, I would say, importance of having AI developed. I call this intelligent by design. That is really include the people, the end users at the beginning of the process, to make sure that at the end of the day, when we work on this, it's going to be implemented and make sense in the reality of these people. So for me, that's a very, very important point. Thank you very much for that. You have a couple of questions. Perhaps you want to answer them in the chat, Marie-Pascale and Sylvain, about the groups, the age, and how you manage that. And also someone is asking for your paper. So just a quick point. So you were very good with time. So it's almost an hour flush. I would like to propose a reward for that. That we take 2 minutes for stretching our legs, grabbing a glass of water, something, because the pace is really intense. So that would be my my proposition. So if we can come back in 10:25, I think that would be nice to start with the roundtable after that. So thank you again, everyone. Muchas gracias. It was amazing. And we'll keep the discussion in a few minutes going on. Thank you. Okay, so we can start again. That was quick, but nice, I guess. So, okay, now we're gonna move on to the roundtable. I just wanna make sure that everybody's there. I think they are.
Are you there, Jesus, Enrique? Ah, yes, Enrique. Jesus too. It's okay. Everybody is here.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so now we have a roundtable for about 40 minutes. We have 4 people on that roundtable. First of all, we have Philippe Després, who's a full professor at the Department of Physics, Engineering, Physics, and Optics at the Université Laval. We then have Émilie Diane, an institutional researcher at VITAM, the Center for Sustainable Health Research at Université Laval. We also have Jesus Favela, who's a professor of computer science at the Computer Science Department. And we have Enrique Sucar, who's senior research scientist at the National Institute for Astrophysics, Optics, and Electronics. Way more easier when it's in English for me, from Puebla, Mexico. So thank you all very much for being here. This is really about a conversation, so it's not too formal, but right to start, I would like to ask you if you have any comments about the preceding presentations. What kind of collaboration does that in health, does that trigger for you or that inspire you? And whether you see that all these developments at the end of the day really face some openness from the healthcare actors, being health minister, health managers, but also clinicians. What do you think the uptake will be of these technologies or propositions? So we want to start.
May I comment?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think one of the common issues, at least in the first 3 presentations, is the problem of getting these applications, AI applications such as COVID or tuberculosis diagnosis, to be useful all around the world. So as illustrated in the retinopathy application, things might work very well in the training data or in the very good data, but once you try to get it into the real world, that becomes difficult. We have also this experience with the COVID diagnosis system that Eduardo presented. When we tried on the images from hospitals in Mexico, the performance was not as good. No, so I think this issue makes, and I like a lot this tuberculosis project, the issue of how to get collaboration and data from all over the world so that these applications really work where they are most needed. No? So for me, that was an interesting issue that came across several of the presentations.
Yes, for sure. The issue of having access to data in such concept around the world has been mentioned by the GPA, the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, like a real issue that we need to work on. So it certainly resonates. Philippe, you want to jump in?
Yeah, just to add on that, that's very important because, you know, AI researchers right now are kind of playing with data sets that are detached from their environment. So it's kind of okay, here's a sandbox. You can play with this data, and people are fitting models or often overfitting models. And then when you bring this in the real life, it doesn't work. So it's kind of strange because the technology is supposed to learn from, you know, new data continuously, but it's not the way it's done. And people have focused on AI, and they kind of forgot about all the infrastructure that you need behind to feed, this technology with data. And I think that this is a problem for the North, and I guess for the South also, to build this infrastructure that will, feed this technology. And nobody kind of noticed that problem yet, in my opinion.
Then a tough question, Philip. Any recommendation to achieve that?
Well, it's just, kind of include all this foundation work in AI, in funding AI. So right now, governments are funding AI with, blindfolded, and they don't think about what it takes behind the scenes to make this technology work. So, government will have to kind of operate this digital transformation before we can get to reap the rewards of AI, in my opinion.
Thank you. Pierre-Marie, I don't know about the order. I'm very sorry about that. I just see, so please don't be offended.
Yes, just to continue on this very important issue you raised, Enrique and Philippe. It's also that this movement is two direction, because what we see is that for us, the South is more an experimental field, because radiologists in the North, they don't want to use AI tools, because there are many issues for their profession and everything. So in a way also, it's not always to have like the South to have access to this technology, but it's also to see how the pilot project, the experimental project are also globalizing, but through the South and not really through the North, with really important issue for health systems in the North too. So that's maybe one point that I wanted to echo to this subject.
Thank you, Pierre-Marie. I see Jesus and Emily.
I'll start. Thank you. Yes, on the same lines, I would suggest. I mean, on the one hand, we don't want to hamper innovation. So it's a good idea to be, to have all these engineers and computer scientists working on these small projects and coming up with ideas and novel things. We want to do some technology scouting to identify some of these projects that are promising, and then bring them together with other stakeholders, perhaps in some type of sandbox workshops, or so where you bring the people that might have identify the problems, the people that might have access to the data or have the data themselves, and those that have some of their solutions. These presentations were very interesting in the senses. I mean, you see how we have different languages. We, some of them went more technical, some of them closer to the user, and this type of dialogue is necessary to bring them together and reach for these projects to reach other levels and other impacts.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, and thank you to all the presentator. It was very interesting to learn about your project and to kind of riff on how the conversation has started, and to kind of jump in on what Philippe was saying in terms of what's behind, right? So all the infrastructure that needs to be built. One of the questions that comes for me as well is always relates to the fast pace of development of technology, right? So by the time that you're trying to create this infrastructure that helps you to, respond to a particular health concern or health issue, the technology is also evolving at the same time, and so you might have been able to kind of develop that infrastructure, but then it might be obsolete, or you might be like having something new, more efficient, more effective, and I think it's that problem as well of being able to create like space for innovation or a capacity to develop this infrastructure in a way that is also agile. And that's a very big question. And the other thing that came up for me as well when I was listening to your presentation, and I really like how the last presentation was opening that conversation as well, it has to do with this engagement of the public, engagement of patient and family, and the consideration as well of the uptake for on the side of health workers, right? But because again, relating to Philippe's point about everything that is required in the background, for me, I'm always like wondering about how does it go with the health workers and how many people are involved in the process of creating that infrastructure of training AI. You know, when we're talking about the imaging, for example, like I'm always wondering about how does that process actually take place, and what are all these resources in the background, and how is that done concretely and effectively, like both with the public, patient, but also healthcare workers, right, who are very likely going to be the one having to, like, you know, either give like input the data in particular way, use these new systems, and maybe use them as well in terms of their care. So that's also where I'd like for the conversation to go. And I felt that was very interesting in the last presentation, how Sylvain, you were talking about how we're not really talking about AI with the public, because this is not a concept that is well understood, right? And I think that educational piece that needs to be going in both direction, right? Because in a certain sense, the term AI itself is also very debated conversation, right? Some people say we can't really talk about AI, and then what does it include? What doesn't it not include? And can we talk about unique intelligence, or are we really talking about such a massive amount of information that you know, there's a responsiveness that happens from there, but that's not necessarily like anything that's like creative per se. So anyway, these are like some of my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Emily. And I just want to add something directly linked to what you just mentioned, but thinking about the Montreal Declaration for Responsible AI, as you might be aware of that declaration, it was co-constructed with experts and citizens. And when people ask me about what do you think is the greatest value added of the declaration, I mean, the output in itself is interesting, but what I say is when I think about the process of how we did this, the educational part was one of the greatest success for me of the Montreal Declaration. And it's not only about educating citizens, but it was also citizens who educated the experts in this case. And really, we learned about the reality of it all and what are the concerns. And sometimes we were just presuming about what was important for them, but then it really was a matter of educating people in both sense. So I think we should not lose track of these important process where we put two people together. And I don't want to go too off script too much, but really this is a question that I have regarding what Jesus mentioned, is we often, especially for a legal scholar, that's clearly in our mindset, we often think that having limitation will limit innovations, right? But what is the balance of having constraint, and how can that help innovation as well? I often think that we see limits as a constraint, or legal constraint, or ethical constraint, all these considerations as something that kind of limit our capacity to innovate, but also think that there's a space, I don't know how big is that space, where when we have some limits, we have to respect a few things, and we have to do this together, or we have some, you know, frames that put us in that space. It also triggers some innovation, and perhaps in a way that might be more sustainable at the end of the day. So just want to raise that question, but then it's not about me, it's about you. So I'm going to stop refraining a little bit my questions. Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
I just want to riff on what you're saying, because I think it's such a good point that you're bringing up, right? The fact that like when we have these things that we call constraint, they're actually such a trigger for creativity and imagination, right? And in a certain sense, it's also about taking, you know, we call them constraint, but really they mean context, right? Because if you just have an open field, well, the reality is we never really just have an open field, right? We have these realities. So this is just context, basically. And I agree. I think that we need that in order to be creative, because otherwise it's like a blank slate, and you have nothing to work with.
Thank you, Jesus.
There's a vast experience in this in the area of hackathons and open data initiatives. So in this particular field of machine learning and modern AI, just bringing data the scientists and to the AI people. It's, as Emily mentioned, it's a trigger. It inspires creativity, and it is challenging. And so that this is a strategy that has worked in the past, and that definitely can work here.
Thank you. Okay, so we can move to a few questions now, and feel free to comment whenever you want. So one of the questions, and these questions were defined with Wanda Munoz. So thank you very much, Wanda, for your help in this. And she's just amazing. Hello, I like you very much. Okay, so what concrete actions can we take as AI specialists and social scientists to ensure that AI developments in healthcare and use are considered, integrated, and respond to the needs of the Global South and historically marginalized people? So how can we think about this in a very inclusive way, and especially in the Global South here? Yes, please go ahead.
I guess I could start. Well, let me first say that when I read the question, it's the first time I think I hear about the Global South. So let me just start by saying that there's North in the Global South and South in the Global North. The OECD, for instance, just I think it was 3 years ago, estimated that more than 21% of children in the US live in poverty, compared to less than 20% in Mexico. This has changed, of course, due to the pandemic and some of the measures that have been held. On the other hand, economic inequality, it's a reality pretty much everywhere within our nations. This is an area, and its impact in healthcare that has been studied in the area of social determinants of health over the last 20 years or so. And within this field, this idea of relative deprivation, that a person feels deprived of something because they had it in the past, or because they feel entitled to because their neighbors or their colleagues have access to that, is a major cause. It's one of the main causes of a decrease in life expectancy that the US has experienced in the last few years. It has been called death of despair. That's from suicide, from drug overdose, mostly by white, middle-aged, non-college educated Americans that experienced depression, apathy, pessimism due to this relative deprivation. So having said that, now focus on AI, three concrete actions. One would be one of the characteristics that it's sometimes overlooked in the advances of AI in recent years is that it is now relatively easy to deploy technology relatively quickly. We have access to very useful tools, but we can also access some of these services to recognize faces, to transfer speech to text, etc., with relatively low technical complexity and relatively low cost. One interesting example that was in the news just a few weeks ago is this AI app that Google came up with for detecting skin conditions. This is an app that you download in your iPhone, and you take some pictures, and it gives you a diagnosis. This technology used less than 5% of the data used was from dark or brown skin. So this highlights this disparity in the training data that was used, that for something like, for this type of applications is really relevant. So one important point is data, making efforts to investing in gathering data, sometimes just digitizing data that's available, validating it, and doing proper annotation, including project management plans in funding proposals. This is very common, for instance, in Europe, very rare here in places like Mexico. One second idea is, I think that, in my own opinion, most researchers are already preoccupied for social good, even if they're not exactly working on that. So if there is proper funding opportunities, if there is some prioritization and different agencies that fund research establish those priorities and provide this context that Emily was talking about, that should incentivize this type of research.
Thank you. Fez, you want to add something?
Yes, thanks. Just regarding that question of access to the Global South, and I guess the whole question of global health equity around AI, I agree. It's a very important question. And what's interesting as far as the work that we're doing on looking at these AI programs for analyzing chest X-rays to detect tuberculosis, I mean, to my knowledge, this is the first time the World Health Organization has endorsed an AI technology, or not, they haven't endorsed it, but they've approved it. And most people think that this is supposed to enhance global health equity, that these technologies will, by perhaps contributing to identifying more people with tuberculosis, will overall enhance global health equity. But what's left out of these discussions, and was one of the reasons we launched our project, was there's often a dichotomy or a disparity even in terms of what we think of as adequate levels of care in the North versus the Global South. And so a chest X-ray, when done in Montreal, it doesn't just tell you if someone has tuberculosis. It can tell you if they have a lung cancer, if they have heart failure, if they have other conditions. But some of these technologies that have been created only focus on tuberculosis, and they're being implemented in health systems that otherwise are not going to benefit from the other information that an X-ray can provide. And so this idea that just inserting a tool that's because it's AI or because it's a new tool can address a major global health problem will possibly still undermine the building of health systems that can address many problems other than just tuberculosis or other specific diseases. So I think there's also internal biases in terms of what we think is adequate and as terms of healthcare delivery and health systems building for the Global South versus the Global North. And the way we're disseminating AI is towards the Global South is also kind of just perpetuating that same disparity in terms of the level of care. And the other issue that it brought up to me was this question of where does the data come from that has developed these software for TB. Some of these software that are commercialized, the companies are really secretive about where the data comes from. But we know enough to know actually that a lot of these X-rays for training came from the Global South. And now they've created these commercialized software, and now they're being sold from the North back to the South. And this whole idea of social justice as a bioethical principle in terms of the people who contributed to the creation of a new intervention should benefit from it has also been very much left to the wayside. So I think there's a lot to explore, and it's particularly fascinating that for tuberculosis, this ancient disease, it's the first time the WHO endorsed an AI technology was for this one.
Thank you, Fez. I think it's a very important point. And as it was mentioned in the chat, it's not only applying to health, but more broadly. So I guess I just challenge you a little bit on how can we be better at this? Because I think we are kind of aware of the problem, maybe not in all the details or all the finesse that we need to have for being more helpful with this problem, but how can we do this better? I would like to ask you the question, big question, but I guess any ideas? Or Enrique, you want to comment on this?
Yes, I think one way to improve this, and I think this tuberculosis project is a good example, is to promote more collaborative research between the North and the South. So I was thinking that actually something as done in Europe to have these projects that are between many countries, but not just at the European level, but at the world level. So maybe the UN or the World Health Organization can try to sponsor this type of collaborative projects. And I think if we make these developments in a more collaborative way, we can develop systems that are more useful around the world. So I think this could be a possibility, to try to get more projects developed in a collaborative way between different areas of the world.
Thank you, Enrique. I don't know, Philippe, Emilio, or Jesus, do you have any comment on that? How to make this better? Activate.
Yeah, well, collaboration is the key. Depending on who you're talking to, collaboration means the industry with academics or kind of thing. So here, going for open science and openness in general is key, I believe. When, a company kind of train its algorithms on public data and then resell it to the public, it's probably not good for anybody except the company. So we have to be careful about this thing. And I think that, government right now have policies regarding open science. So that means open data, open software, and so forth. And we should embrace it as academic, but also the companies should also embrace these principles at some point. I know that they're often there to make profits, but there's a way to give back, and most of the data comes from the public in general, so the public should have something in return.
And funding agencies can help to get some traction there as well by requiring that the researchers that are funded really open access. I don't know, Jesus or Emily, do you want to comment as well as how we can activate this project of being
I might jump in. Maybe my comments are going to be a bit sidetracked, but I think for me, it's also kind of comes down to sometimes a cost benefit aspect, right? Of okay, how much in relation to this particular problem, especially with questions that relate to social equity and social determinants of health, how much is exploring a solution through AI development is really going to help us, in terms, it is going to identify like the right answer, is going to be a good cost benefit, as will have been an opportunity to mobilize well the public. I really like, Catherine, when you were talking earlier about the process of the Déclaration de Montréal. I think that's a very important thing that also tends to be forgotten when we're doing research, and at the same time and not just research, medical practice as well. Like we're always something happens. There's something that happens in the method, right? In the methodology, and we need to reflect more about that. And that to me, who's really interested in implementation science as well, that's a big part of it, right? To kind of focus much, much more on the process and what's happening in the process, how you're also participating in some kind of transformation in terms of how you think, social organization, society itself, the direction where you want to go. And I mean, Philip, you were talking about the private sector and the corporation, the fact that they want to do money. I think that for us, as researcher as well, we do have all sorts of pressure in terms of publishing, in terms of, there's all these things that to me needs to be part of much more integrated in how we think about those development. So anyway, just to wrap up, but also clarify what I'm trying to say, because I'm saying multiple things at once. I do think that this idea of thinking much more about the process and who we're involving and how we're involving and what type of impact the process itself can have, of really kind of going much more upstream and reflecting about, okay, does AI is the right kind of avenue to start looking into this problem, and how could we potentially have collaboration where some people are not necessarily doing AI and some others are exploring the avenue for AI development, especially for considering social inequality or like mobilizing marginalized community. And then I felt there was one more thing I put in that mix, but anyway, I think that's enough.
Go ahead.
Yes, I would argue also for data traceability, which is now more technically feasible. Perhaps you don't need to explicitly show what your data is, but put it in a format that can be traced. And for instance, if errors are found afterwards or some deficiencies, you can go back and figure out what happened there. There was recently research at the MIT that found some errors in ImageNet, one of the most used data sets for image classification with AI. And these were slight errors, but if you can go back to your models and perhaps eliminate, correct some of those things, or for a regulatory agency to identify, perhaps, I mean, this might not have been known at the time when the technology was deployed, but years after that you can go back and put some doubts and perhaps correct those models. So this is becoming technically more viable, and this is something that can be worked on and incorporated, particularly when some solutions arrive to a level of maturity where their impact is higher, the stakes are high.
Thank you. And I just encourage everybody, if you have any questions, put them in the chat so I can ask the question in the panel, the roundtable. So I have two more questions. I see time is flying, but we'll have more time for broader discussion with everybody at the end. So one thing that I mentioned following up the presentation at the beginning is we have this issue right now, which has been called the most inconvenient truth about AI in healthcare by some authors, is the fact that it's a field where we have a lot of developments, a lot of research, and we have a lot of hopes, really. But at the end of the day, what is actually being implemented in healthcare system is not at the same height of what is produced at the beginning or that we try to produce. So can you just elaborate a little bit on how can we close that gap? Because I think at the end of the day, it's important not only for trust towards innovation, but all the investment that we make. And also to make sure that we really create something of value for the people, the patients and healthcare professionals in our healthcare system more broadly. So do you have any recommendations or comments on this gap and how we can close it? Some people say, for instance, that we think a lot about the research and development, but we don't have a lot of money invested. And then when you have it, how can you make sure that it is implemented in practice? So that phase is kind of totally neglected. So any comments on that? And if it's a common issue between Mexico and Canada, I would be interested. Yes, Enrique, please.
Yes, I think there are several issues that have to do with this, let's say, lack of actual implementation of all these AI developments, in particularly in health applications. One that we already comment, that things might work very well in the training data, but once you go to the real world, they don't work as well. So that is, I think, one issue. And I think another one, in particular in medical application, and this is something that is becoming very important now, is this issue of explainable AI. So medical doctors just know what the system to tell them this is the diagnosis, but say a bit more. Why? What did you find out? So I think having more explainable systems, more transparent systems, will make it that these systems are more easily adapted in the medical field. No? So I think for me, these are two of the problems that limit the application of these developments.
Very good point, Enrique. I know about the others. Philip, do you have any comments on that since you're connected to the
Well, you mean South versus...
No, just generally, how can close the gap between research and implementation in healthcare?
It's all about adoption barriers. I mean, and like was said before, it's professional independence issues, it's cultural issues. You know, this gap has been studied a lot, not just for AI, but for, you know, EHR, basically, just any kind of transformation in healthcare. And often it comes down to, you know, developers going hand to hand with end users. And it's not specific to AI. Any IT project, you need to, you know, bring together developers and end user. They have to express their need. They have to express the functionalities they expect from the application. And this part we are not very good at doing right now in AI. You know, AI researchers are in their corner, end users are in their corner, and they're basically not talking to each other. Mm-hmm. So closing the gap would be just, you know, to have these people in the same room and just having, you know, and that's what we try to do with, we do have a training program that is, this program, Catherine. It's all about, you know, having these people trained in technical skills, being aware of all this, you know, all the ethical, legal, social implication of their work. And we try to get them closer to the end user so that they can understand their needs. So closing the gap is all about, you know, exposing people, AI researcher to, for example, clinical people, and clinical people to AI researcher. So I guess that's, we try, you know, as an academic to do this through training programs, but you know, in the industry, it's the same problem. You know, you really need to bring people together, basically.
Thank you, Philip. I would be curious to hear about. Oh, Jesus. No, okay. I thought you had your. To hear about our patient partner, Sylvain, if he has anything to say about this.
Well, I've been a couple of research. By the way, I'm 2-time heart transplant recipient. I have skin cancer, diabetic, and lots of collateral problems. And one of the experience that I have is basically on an AI application. There's a lot of things offered to patients, but they basically never consult the patient before they offer the application or something like that. And then people hope that patient will respond and stay in the research project for nothing, because you never get feedback when you participate in a project. And also, as health workers, I would say most of health workers don't know what AI is doing. And the guy who does the radiology or things like that probably doesn't know that, I would say, Ulyss will maybe use his image later to check the AI. So all end users should be sensitized to the use and the potential use of the data that is collected, and also the potential use of patient implicated in there. Because rapidly, there's a project that they asked us at the beginning what would be great in an arrhythmia application. They spent 2 years, 1.5 million, and then they call us back 2 years later, and they said, "Here's the application," and then we said, "Well, it's not really friendly user. Oh, it's too late now." So it should be in all process, and health workers should be also in health process. So that way, when the application or whatever comes out, they will have an ownership on it, but also know that it's relevant to the needs that were adjusted since Emily said, probably because AI is changing every week and the results are changing every week. Voila.
Thank you very much, Sylvain. So I see time is flying. So I think I would ask each member of the roundtable any comments they would like to add at this point, and then we can open the full floor to everybody. And just want to mention also, I read the comment of Fez. It was more a comment than a question, I think, but I couldn't agree more than what he said. So Enrique, you want to start by any comments?
Okay, well, I think one of the important issues was one of the questions you sent us previously about the collaboration between AI specialists and the stakeholders, and particularly the relevant ministries. And I think in particular in the context of Mexico, this is very important. This is something we need to do more at all levels, you know, starting from education. I think we need to talk more with the Ministry of Education and see how we can influence education, in particular the basic, secondary levels, so the children get basics of these areas to be prepared for the future. Also with the Ministry of Economy to promote the use of AI technology, with the Congress to establish laws for regulating AI use, particularly in critical applications, such as medicine, law, military, and also with the Ministry of Research, with CONACYT, to have more research in this area. No? So I think this collaboration with government is critical. I think Canada is much more advanced in that sense, and Quebec in particular, than Mexico. And I think that's one thing we need to do. And maybe what we need is a kind of a champion in government that could be the interface to make this more collaboration and have really a good ecosystem in AI for the future in Mexico.
Thank you very much, Enrique. Emily, you want to go?
Sorry, I was reading the comments in the chat at the same time. It's trying to do multitasking is not really the best thing to do right now. I'm still I'm still thinking about this question of the implementation, right? And really closing the gap between knowledge and what's happening on the field. And I really do think, in a certain sense, we have to be kind of, how can I say, generous toward ourselves, in the sense that I think that cohabitation and collaboration is the way to go, but it is about creating a new culture, and that doesn't happen overnight. And I think that having this contact with one another is kind of the initial step, right? So for example, if you want to have people who know the technology, who do AI development in however we want to think it, but in the context of healthcare establishment, for example, cohabiting these spaces or having opportunity to converse with one another. And I think that you create this common language, this culture in this community, and that's already a good way to go. And also it puts people who work with the data in the field, right? So they get the sense of what is the reality, and they don't necessarily need to it's going to be intuitive to them as well. So when they think about the development of the AI, they're going to be thinking about these things as well. So that would be kind of one of the comment that I would add. And then just going back on this idea of process, right? And how when we're talking about education and when we're talking about literacy, when we're talking about AI, we have to be honest and serious about engaging people from different backgrounds, marginalized community as well, and really listen, to what is their vision of technology, and use that in terms of trying to be creative about it as well. I think that all too often, it's so exciting and so exhilarating, the possibility that when we start thinking about the technology and when we start thinking about big data, but I think that at the end of the day, other people are going to have some ideas as well, and it's really important if we want to if we want to avoid the kind of ever growing gap between marginalized community and the rest, kind of create these spaces for conversation.
Thank you, Emily. I just want to add that I think we all agree that collaboration is important, but it's not always natural. So it always also comes with leadership, I think. People will really value that kind of collaboration and take the lead and put these people together, and really our focus on this objective also comes with the realization of this broader objective of being collaborative, because it's passively, it's not always that easy. So it takes active measures. Jesus, do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. A couple of points. One related to technology adoption and tailoring, particularly in fields such as preventive health and chronic disease management, would be research methodologies that are already there. Action research, participatory research, user-centered design for community-centered and user-centered, involving all stakeholders into their research. These are not so commonly used in the technical field, but in some areas such as human-computer interaction, we have some experience in that, and just perhaps educating some technical people and building these collaborative research initiatives would bring that to the table. And somewhat on those lines, the issue of training. I think there's a need to train people basically from all professions on machine learning. My opinion is that this field will be similar to statistics, where someone who studies biology, medicine, social science, psychology knows statistics. They might not be able to build the software, those hypothesis testing or whatever, but they know their data. They're close to it. They know what type of hypothesis tests they need to conduct. And I think machine learning is going in that direction. So the tools are already there. We need to have earth scientists and biologists and healthcare people in the healthcare domain be familiar with them, but perhaps use them when they're trained in college to some degree, and eventually be able to use it with their own data. And in the other direction, we need to train technical people in issues such as ethics. For instance, just introducing review boards. There's a discussion in AI conferences and journals about requiring ethical approval of some of the research that's being presented there. This is not being common in these fields until relatively recent. I mean, discussion is going on, and of course, there's vast experience in the health sciences in this regard. So there needs to be some communication and training to get familiar with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, education, very important. Comes back to the point mentioned by Enrique. And just regarding the ethical approval, one challenge we had at University of Montreal is during the COVID-19, a lot of projects in AI were happening, and they were looking for people to evaluate all the ethical aspects, but being able to understand the technique in itself, and the lack of people being able to do that was kind of a problem. So we also need to build the capacity on both sides, people who understand a little bit of technology from social science and the other way around, but that was a challenge. So thank you very much. Philippe, you want to last word for this?
Yeah, just closing comments. We have seen in the past, corporation kind of testing their drugs in population or jurisdiction where, the laws or privacy laws are not, as constraining as ours. And we have to be careful about this with the data coming from some jurisdiction. So we don't want to repeat that kind of non-ethical use of population for some purposes. And we'll have to be careful about that, in North and South relations in the future, I think.
Great, thank you very much. Philippe, Guillaume, what's next? Do we still have time for broader questions with the audience, and how much time?
Yes, we can have 10 minutes, then.
Okay. Perfect. So I see there are some comments in the chat. I don't know if Wilfrano, you want to ask your question or comment? Or not?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this presentation. They are really important, very interesting. I'm just wondering on the idea of promote between population of data as a collective world, not only a private one, but a collective world. And I think that we should to promote this idea in order to push up on the one side research in, for instance, in machine learning, to take this idea between the production of algorithms, because computer science and artificial intelligence was born without the idea of data as a property of someone. I mean, it was just like a raw material that we can produce, we can transform, but there is not a clear idea of who belongs and what are the implications of transforming this data. So I think that this is an issue, not only ideological issue, but a technical one that we should approach in some way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on that? Okay, Wanda, I know you've commented a fair bit in the chat. Do you want to add anything or a little bit more?
No, not really. Just to thank everyone, and I think it's a fascinating discussion, and we have many areas I think where we could be discussing for longer. But something that is interesting for me to hear about all these projects and all these questions and concerns and proposals in the sector of health, because I don't work on health at all, and I see how many links there are with other sectors as well. So that has been very interesting for me. That's all. I'm sorry, and just to insist on the comments from Faiz, because I think it's really fascinating to see we cannot just work on AI. I mean, those of you who work just on AI specifically, without looking at the wider context of what is happening in other sectors, in regulation. And that is something that we will be, I make a note for the session tomorrow that we will be discussing tomorrow too, of, for example, how gender is not only an implication on AI, but how to look at it in the context of the wider gender inequalities and how we can respond to them more widely. So it's been very inspiring for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanda. Eduardo, you want to comment?
Yes, Catherine. Yes, when you ask about what we use about the ethical principles, what kind of document, we use a lot of documents. The beginning, somebody provided us a kind of checklist, but I feel bad with that checklist because I believe that, okay, I put this checkbox and I accomplish everything. It's not make sense for me. So I try to find another papers, reviews, and these kind of things in order to try to be in line with that, with the responsible AI. Yes. So that's the way we work in that thing. And it's not finished. We are looking for more material with more technique to try to explain what happened with the data. Here says about this gap between the nice data and the actual data. I mean, these data come from real patients. Is also an actual data, but something happened in the tails of the distribution that we have not useful data. So we try to understand when the model or the models are useful and when the model is not useful. Mm-hmm. If we have a black image there, I ask for experiment if one physician can classify this image. It's impossible. It's also impossible for the models. So we need to understand the limits of the models and the data. That's my comments.
Thank you very much for this thoughtful comment, and I think it ends perfectly that really fascinating day, not day, half day, I would say. So muchas gracias. Thank you. Merci, everybody. I think it's been very insightful, and I think it's going to lead to great collaboration. So thank you, OBVIA, also for organizing this event, and our colleague from Mexico. Thank you very much. And on that, I leave the floor to Lise, I think, for ending this session. Thank you.
No, thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everybody. I think it's very rich. Like Wanda said, it's so interesting. And if you look in the chat, you will see a lot of comments. So thank you, everybody. I hope you will be with us this afternoon. It's a rendezvous, and have a great lunch. Thank you, Catherine, to animate this debate in the round table. Thank you.